Amarillo by morning, up from San Antone. Everything that I've got is just what I've got on. But when the sun is high in that Texas sky, I'll be bucking at the county fair. Amarillo by morning, Amarillo, I'll be there. They took my saddle in Houston, broke my leg in Santa Fe, lost my wife and a girlfriend somewhere along the way. Well, I'll be looking great when they pull that gate, and let's hope that judge ain't blind. Amarillo by morning, Amarillo's on my mind. Amarillo by morning, up from San Antone. Everything that I've got is just what I've got on. Well, I ain't got a dime, but what I got is mine. I ain't rich, but Lord, I'm free. Amarillo by morning, Amarillo's where I'll be. It's Amarillo by Morning by George Strait. So welcome to the second episode of Confessions of a Mad Redneck. This next episode is called Redneck, Oppressor or Oppressed. So I wanna start with a little disclaimer. It's gonna be a little rough at the beginning. You know, I love being a redneck. I love redneck culture, but there's dark stuff in our history, and I'm gonna talk about it a little bit. But it's going in a positive direction. So just bear with me. So when Europeans arrived in the New World, they established plantations, particularly in Virginia. And those early plantations did not have slaves; they had indentured servants, and they had African of many different cultures and European of many different cultures, both working together on the plantation side by side. The Over the years, the plantation owners created more and more oppressive types of terms to the indentured servitude contract. And in 1656, black or European and African indentured servants joined together and rebelled against the plantation owners, and that was called Nathan's Nathan's Rebellion, Bacon's Rebellion, excuse me. And it's interesting to note that both African and Europeans worked together to try and get a better situation for themselves, and the plantation owners responded by inventing the concept of race and white supremacy. So what you start seeing in the historical literature is that Europeans of many different cultures start to become one type of person, which is a white person, and Africans of many different cultures started to be another type of person, which was a black person. So they essentially invented the concept of race so that they could create racial solidarity between the new whites and the plantation owners and prevent any sort of resistance to the plantation system. Now, we rednecks, and we weren't called rednecks at that time. I'll get to that in a minute. We took the bait sort of hook, line, and sinker. We took the advantages that were given to us, which was the ability to own property and have freedom of movement, while the new blacks were becoming enslaved. And basically, we lived in a one-room shack on the edge of the plantation, and were giving an overseer job of the slaves, and we thought we were getting something. We thought that being able to oversee slaves on the plantation was something that we could hang our hat on. And this system basically continued until 1865 with the end of slavery and the Civil War. Now, in the South, there's a lot of people who say that it was the War of Northern Aggression, right? You've heard that all the time. And they basically argue that the North wanted to take over the South economically, that the South had an advantage economically and was bleeding the North, and the North wanted to take over the South. And then, everybody else says, well, it was about slavery. Well, these two things are the same thing. Slavery was integral in Southern society and a complete part of the Southern economic system. So if the North wanted economic integration with the South, they were going to have to end slavery and create free labor like there was in the North. Well, after the Civil War, there was Reconstruction, and there was a time when there was some equality between blacks and whites until 1876 and the failure of Reconstruction. Reconstruction failed because the plantation owners in the South and Northern industrialists came to an agreement that the North would sort of have a hands-off policy with the South and let the planters take over. So after the failure of Reconstruction, there was the creation of black codes and different types of policies and ideas that sort of started to reestablish white supremacy. However, in the 1890s, there was a moment of solidarity between poor black farmers and poor white farmers in the populist movement. And the populist movement would have probably won many elections had the plantation owners and the industrialists not stolen the elections illegally. The response to the populist movement was that the planters and the plantation owners and the industrialists reinterpreted and reimposed white supremacy. And in Alabama, the planters and the industrialists created the Alabama State Constitution, which was explicitly stated to establish white supremacy and to disenfranchise poor blacks legally, so to speak. So you'll see a pattern when blacks and whites come together to fight against oppressors. The oppressors use white supremacy to divide blacks and whites and make sure there's no solidarity among the common folk. Interestingly, in 1893 is when we started to become talked about as rednecks. People started calling us rednecks, and it just referred to the necks of poor white farmers and working folks throughout the South. Eventually, by 1910, redneck had come to mean a politically active Southern white working class person, and it basically meant freedom fighter. Redneck essentially meant freedom fighter. Now, the ultimate result of economic integration and all of the stuff that the plantation owners and the industrialists did was that more and more land in the South became owned by people outside the South. Currently in Alabama, over half of all property in the South is owned by people who don't live in the South. So that's sort of getting at some sort of oppression of all people in the South, but I want to specifically focus on rednecks. It wasn't until the 1970s that rednecks started to become a derogatory term. And one of the ways that oppressors justify oppressing people is that they characterize the people they are trying to oppress as ignorant, sexually deviant, violent, and animalistic. And as an example of how this has been done to rednecks, I want to talk about the film Deliverance. And Deliverance is characterized by the Library of Congress as aesthetically, historically, or culturally significant. And Deliverance opens with a scene of dueling banjos, and the redneck people in that film are characterized as ignorant, violent, animalistic, and sexually deviant. And so since the 1970s, there's been a huge narrative that has been created to demean and call redneck stupid, and this all serves the function of justifying the South being an oppressed region. Now I'm going to give one more example, and then I'll leave it to you till till next month. In Harlan County, Kentucky, they have strip mining that destroys entire communities, pollutes the water, pollutes the air, and makes people poor. That strip mining is for the creation of coal, or the mining of coal. That coal is then taken and burned in power plants that serve a primarily urban customer. The ash from that coal is then shipped to a place like Uniontown, Alabama, which is an almost exclusively black and very poor county in Perry County, Alabama. And it's dumped there, which also destroys their community and causes them health problems and causes them to be poor. Yet, we as rednecks seem to have more solidarity with more racial solidarity with the board of directors of the energy companies than we do with the people who are in the black folks who are in very similar situations to what we're in. So I'm gonna leave this this vlog with a question for you, and that question is: are we going to join with other oppressed peoples and get back what is rightfully ours, or are we going to live in the shack on the edge of the plantation? And I want you to ponder that for the next month. The next month is not going to be as deep. We're going to talk a little bit about the legend of the free state of Winston. And y'all have a happy Thanksgiving. And this is Zach Henson, Confessions of a Mad Redneck, McCalla, Alabama, November 2015.